Okay, so who won the debate in your eyes?
No one.
Okay.
I mean, that was literally like two titans pushing each other and nobody went off the edge. But I would say that if you had to look at it in terms of like long-term effects, regardless of the outcome of the election, if you just look at the transcripts, like if you were to print this stuff out and just read it as text on a screen, Biden failed colossally because not only did he defend indefensible things, make outright evil statements or defend evil stuff, he wouldn't denounce Antifa, wouldn't even try. He just said that they were an idea, not an organization. I mean, they're literally burning the country down. Like you can find them on Facebook. Yeah, they're basically terrorists. They do exactly what terrorists have always done.
Right.
And this is the same rhetoric that he and Obama used when they were talking about ISIS. Oh, they don't have one just head. You cut off one head and they pop up over here. It's like, gee, what does that sound like?
Hail Hydra.
Antifa. And so these organizations, they act like terrorists, and then he gives them cover because they're politically expedient to him right now. Having the cities in flames and having Antifa and BLM people running around roughshod is a great way for him to leverage people in the middle who are afraid into voting for what they perceive to be the sane, viable, nice and easygoing, lukewarm alternative. Mm-hmm. Whereas if they can portray Trump as just gasoline on a fire, maybe they can scare the suburban security moms into voting for Biden instead of for the big crazy orange man who makes all of the bad things happen.
Can I make a point that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with our topic, but I just got to say, I know at first I said that 2020 is a dookie pie, and I still think it's a dookie pie.
I would concur with that.
The only good thing that has come about this year for me is you. If this year hadn't been such a dookie pie, I would have never met Scott.
No, this is true. For as much of a dumpster fire as this year has been, like it's been phenomenal for our love life because I don't know if we would have met and had all of this to bond over.
I don't think we would have. But I also think that this dookie pie is they're using it as blackmail. So you got Antifa and Black Lives Matter. They're burning your city down, and they're probably going to come to your home and scream on the outside of it and spray paint it. Then you've got coronavirus, and you may die of that or your grandmother.
Despite the 99% survival rate for people in our demographic.
But you still may die. And then you got the kids. They're doing virtual learning. So if you're a single parent, you're going to go to work or you're going to watch your kids. I don't know what you're going to do. I'm sorry.
Assuming you still have work.
You got the killer hornets, the murdering hornets that came and they tried to kill us as well.
Apparently there's the press eating raccoons at the White House.
There's the press eating raccoons. They're trying to kill us. And we got the shutdown. So if you have a small business, if it hasn't been shut down already, it's probably going to be.
I don't know how they've stayed open as long as they have. The people who rode this out all year.
Some people have probably got some capital.
They must have been sitting on a lot of money, and now they're just running dry.
I mean, in our city alone, as of September, 60% of the small businesses closed. So I think that the Democrats, the way that they're talking, like you've got Kamala Harris talking about the riots, and she's like, it's going to happen. It needs to happen. It's going to continue to happen.
Amongst many other new Democrat voices.
I'll keep you safe from this virus. I don't know how, but they're going to do it. And so they've got this dookie pie that they're just like, I'll make this dookie pie go away. You just got to vote D. And I think it pisses me off.
More like they're force feeding it to us.
They're force feeding dookie pie, and there's not enough floss in the world to get it out of your teeth.
No, there's not enough quips to brush that away. I want to talk a little bit more though about, because they're the most powerful voting base, the people in the middle, right? Because they constitute the largest, they constitute the majority. So the people who don't necessarily, like you and I, fall hard right or hard left and occupy that big space in the middle of the political spectrum, they're going to be the ones who, when they pull the levers, are going to determine who ends up in the White House. And this is something that I mentioned in my little video when I was petitioning people to respond. Now,
wait, plug that in. Please go check that out at number 2 Americas on Facebook. It's a good video, and he's really cute in it.
Thank you, dear. And like I said, the responses I got were fascinating because they ran the gamut in terms of political ideologies and backgrounds, but there were some people that were tipped one way or the other, and then there were a bunch that weren't. What I noticed was a trend, though. There's very specific types of, I'm just going to call them moderates for the sake of being broad.
Okay.
But note that when I say that, I'm referring to some quasi like libertarian types, leftists that are not necessarily on board with like sort of the Green New Deal and that sort of thing, but they're sort of harder left than the classical liberal or left leaners. People who are, just sort of centrists and that sort of thing, and then independents and undeclareds, and they it seems to me that there is a kind of arrogance and a vanity, an intellectual vanity that is associated with being in the middle. They like the fact that they get to consider themselves the moderate. They like to think of themselves as the ice in the coffee cup. They're the ones bringing the temperature down. They have this sort of conceit that while you and I are losing our minds yelling across the street at the crazy leftists who are losing their minds yelling back at us, they're the people that are just kind of ducking in their car trying to go down the street. And they're not necessarily wrong about this, but I did want to point out a few problems with their logic. I feel like one of the types of people that you see in the middle are these people who are so intellectually vain that they're willing to let the world burn just to prove how stupid the world is. It's a kind of nihilism and a kind of intellectual vanity that borders on pride.
Okay.
And it definitely is a basis of pride in it. It's this idea that I am balancing this tightrope of political ideology. And it's like you've got angry Dobermans and like angry German Shepherds on both sides trying to get at your feet. And you're just sort of delicately navigating this sort of chaotic political world. And you're above it all, sort of like that famous guy who walked between two buildings. The reality is that you're just a fence rider. You're just afraid to pick a side.
Right.
And the reason people are afraid to pick a side, I think, is because they don't have any foundational ideologies or hard truths to bind them.
Exactly.
See, the thing that I respect about hardcore communists, for as much as I want to make them disappear from the earth, is that they actually have chosen a side and they actually have skin in the game. They're actually out there willing to get arrested. They're willing to get shot. They're willing to go to blows. They're willing to suffer the deprivations of financial futures and, getting and having polite society accept them. They're willing to be on the margins to push their utopia forward. Christians, very much the same way, if they're true believers. They're willing to walk into the lion's den, so to speak. So in that way, you have two ideological crusades going on that are competing for the same space. Moderates can always whine and complain about how, oh no, Christians are too extreme, but I'm not a communist either, and that sort of thing. So I'm going to vote for that Biden guy. Really? I mean, during the debate, he said, no, the Green New Deal, it's my program. I'm not using the Green New Deal. And then like in the next breath, he says the Green New Deal will pay for itself.
Oh, shady.
And you just can't base that. You can't trust that kind of hypocrisy. The guy's lying and talking out of both sides of his mouth. And he's doing this during a presidential debate. He's got Kamala Harris in there, who is, again, a person who put forward the Green New Deal and supported it in the Senate. So this is one of those things that you just can't ignore.
Right.
If they're going to take leftist positions, you can't pretend that you're taking the vaunted, well, I'm going to go with the person who brings the temperature down and acts more reasonable, but behind the scenes, he's pushing extreme leftism.
Mm-hmm.
This is just you being low information. If you don't know enough, you can't base it on a person's attitude because people lie.
Mm-hmm.
And people lie in politics. You've spent all these years navigating that tightrope, and you're telling me that you're not cunning enough to recognize when somebody's manipulating you? Maybe you're not. Maybe all of that was just a conceit. Maybe you aren't as smart or as wise or above it all as you think you are, and maybe you're just lazy and you don't want to Google search things that stress you out. So when it comes to being in the middle, I have a lot of beef with people in the middle because I was in the middle. I was a classic fence sitter. This is what my dad called me for years, and he did so disparagingly. He was so annoyed that I didn't pick a side that he liked to give me that nickname. And he always felt, he's like, you're never going to be satisfied or have a home until you actually buckle down and pick and make some enemies. And he's like, and that's just how it works.
That's interesting.
And I feel like most of the nation likes to pretend that if they just sit in their house, act civil, raise their kids okay, pay their taxes, and just generally try to follow most traffic laws and not watch too much porn, at least when their wife is around, that things will be okay. We've been in a warlike position for more than 4 years. This started with way before Obama. But Obama just raised the temperature, and then Trump's campaign raised it again because everybody was responding to each other, and it's this Mentos in a Coke mix. So if you're pretending that your position, this sort of soft-pedaled, relaxed sort of can't we just return to normalcy position is going to fix things, is not just naive. It almost seems to me like you just don't care. It seems to me that you're just stepping off the playing field and you're letting everything burn because you don't want to participate because you're afraid.
Well, how much of it do you think is actual fear? How much of it is low information? How much of it is they're in the middle because they don't have absolute truths that they believe in?
It's hard to parse because I don't have enough responses to really give you like a statistical breakdown. But I'll say just from the people who responded to me for my video, I'd say it's 33, 33, 33.
What was it for you?
What was it for me that changed me from being a fence sitter?
No, what was it for you that made you a fence sitter?
What made me a fence sitter was vanity. It was this idea that I grew up with evangelical type Christians who were a little bit stifling, especially when they were younger and they were newer believers. And so that was frustrating because I would ask them questions based on scientific inquiry and they would give me sort of a stock religious answer because they didn't know the answer. So that naturally, my sort of young, tenacious, curious mind, that didn't bode well. I was like, that doesn't work. There's something wrong with that. And then when I started investigating things from a sort of scientific materialist perspective later in life, through my own inquiry and through college and whatnot, and hanging out with a lot of leftists in LA, I realized that they weren't particularly good at answering my questions either. They had their own sets of problems and biases. And I realized that when I asked them questions about religion or God or sort of like conservative policies or anything like that, most of it was just histrionics and emotional reactions, and not a lot of it was actually based in policy or outcome. And so the more I learned about actual outcomes, the more I realized I started to drift back to conservatism and Christianity. Because when you actually look at the data, when you actually look at what happens, when you actually look at how people respond to, say, like somebody like Trump, you could say, oh, I want the calm, measured person all you want, but you still get like a visceral gut reaction that's positive when Marty McFly punches out Biff in Back to the Future, right? You know, and they're always calling him yellow, and he like turns around, he's like, no one ever calls me that, right? There's something instinctual about that in men. The left always wants you to ignore your instincts. They want you to ignore reality in favor of a utopia that they're trying to manipulate you towards. But that's just not how reality works. So that's what made me kind of convert back. And this is something I try to talk to, you know, sort of my fence riding fellows with, you know, is I've been where you're at. I understand some of your motivations and some of your not so flattering motivations. And I don't necessarily respect it anymore. You need to have a foundation that's firmer than, oh, well, I'm just smarter than everybody else. Oh, look at me. Like, look at these stupid Republicans and these Democrats fighting. They're basically the same people. No, they're not. There's politicians that use the same tactics. There's politicians that exist in the same ecosphere and go to the same restaurants and glad hand and go and sit in the same meetings at the same boardroom tables. But foundationally, these people are very different, especially now with the rise of populism with Trump. So we need to actually sit down and do the research if we're going to pretend that we want Plato's Philosopher King. We need to know more about what our king should be then. Because I think this is what really drives a lot of the intellectual vanity of the people in the middle, is they want somebody out there who is going to have the temperament of Biden, but he's going to have the strength of Trump, and he's going to have the integrity that they feel they have in their own hearts and the people that they respect. But he's also not going to be one of these weird God worshiper, spaghetti monster worshiper people. He's going to be scientific. And this person doesn't exist, will never exist. There's no human that will ever be that person. You know, sort of Plato's Philosopher King is an ideal. It is not a person. So if you're just sitting back and waiting for this ideal to take over and just sort of casting your vote willy-nilly based on your feelings, then you're no better than the people that you're calling pawns and sheep.
I think one of the reasons why that person doesn't exist is because every personality has its vices and its virtues. And usually when you're talking about your kind of alpha male, like Robin Hood type of swashbuckling character that loves adventure and doesn't mind a fight, like that kind of person usually also comes with some vices that are not super likable. Like it's like they're probably going to be a little too aggressive. They're probably going to be kind of sarcastic. They're going to always trying to make everybody else step up. Like there's because truthfully, my pastor is that way. I'm a little bit like that. And there's certain parts of my personality that people just don't like. And sometimes I don't even like it because it's a little bit too much. Like I like to fight on Facebook and get really sarcastic on social media and stuff. And people are like, yeah, you do like to stir the pot. It's a vice and a virtue because some people like it, and then you make people think, and you make people, they have to at that point choose to change their mind or stay the way that they are. They're aware now of the issue because I just brought it up, because that's the way that I am. So there's vices and virtues. So you're not going to have this guy that's going to be that's going to lead everybody into battle, have law and order, that's going to be the type of guy that doesn't take any crap, but he's also like your grandpa. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like that's just not going to happen.
No, and it doesn't merge that way. You can create characters like that in fiction, but in reality, they tend not to bear out those kinds of opposing traits, right? Like if you meet a warrior on the battlefield, odds are he's probably also a terrible person to have in your living room, because he's hyper aggressive, probably bombastic, probably annoying, probably has bad personal hygiene, and will yell and cuss a lot and maybe break stuff. You know, but on a battlefield, he's an ideal candidate because he's going to watch your back and he's going to savage the enemy, and you feel safe with him. It's why we have male and female paradigms, right? You know, it's why women have made jokes for eons about, you know, domesticating men, because we'll just come in and scratch and get track mud and, you know, make noises and fart, and you guys are just over there just like, oh my gosh. And women are dainty and feminine and clean and sugar and spice and everything nice. I mean, this is why this paradigm exists. So everybody's kind of bought into this illusion that they can have it all in one person, and they're just going to sit there and complain and nitpick who is necessary for the times in favor of voting for somebody that makes them feel less stressed out. Because some of the interactions that I had were interesting and telling, because they were mostly from females, where they were telling me that they actually got anxiety watching the debates. There was too much stress, there was too much noise, there was too much fighting. Seriously? And it made them feel bad, and the insulting and everything, and it made them afraid. And
sorry, that's
so they're kind of leaning towards casting their lot in with Biden because he made them feel less afraid. And
really?
But there were also some who felt the same thing, who were casting their lot in with Trump for the exact same reason. But their logic is that it wasn't that he calmed me down, it's that he made me feel safe, like he could handle it.
Right.
And so, again, it's, you know, there's like evolution and personal psychology and all sorts of stuff goes in there. So it's really hard to tell which way the needle moved, if at all. And I think most commentators get this right, that it really didn't move too much because it was too much of the same that we've been seeing. But the people in the middle have strong opinions that they're not voicing, and I've gotten to hear a few of them lately.
Yeah. I was going to say, I'm wondering about the folks that aren't like us. Like, we keep up with this stuff all year.
Oh, yeah. I'm not, if I'm not on my phone, it's because I'm actively doing something physical or something, because I'm almost always checking information.
Right. So I've got folks in my life who are like, okay, yeah, voting time is coming up. Let me pay attention, right? Which is admirable. Because you shouldn't just go to the polls and just start filling in names. That's stupid. The problem is that you've had 4 years to pay attention, and so then now you're calling up all your political friends like Scott and I, and you're like, and this is kind of a rebuke a little bit. I'm not trying to make anyone feel condemned, because at least you are searching for information. I would say it's like the people who, like, you're a regular churchgoer, and then they're the folks that just come on Easter.
You know, there's a lot of that, though. I mean, it's the low information voter, paradigm. They're showing up with the nice yellow blouse and the bonnet, and it's the first time you've seen them in a whole year.
Yeah, Juju, where you been, Juju?
Pookie, how you doing?
Yeah,
I haven't seen you since Easter.
Where have you been? I saw you last Easter, and that's it.
He's just here for the barbecue. Maybe meet a few girls.
Oh, Grandma says she's cooking at the church.
Got some of that chicken? That famous chicken you make, Grandma?
That's racist, Scott.
Yes, totally. Anyway, and I think it's true. It really is. There's a ton of people who are suddenly getting engaged in the political process simply because it's that fourth year. It's that fall season when they have the debates. and they're just now tuning in because you were telling me that like people in your family and friends have been like kind of asking you because they know you're the political person, like what does he mean by this and what is he referring to with this, because they literally have no context. I think this is one of the areas where Trump fell flat on his face with the debates, and it was because he's so in the fight and Biden is so in the fight that they're having this war of sort of unspoken acceptance. Like it's like this happened, this happened, this happened, this headline, and this, and they're assuming that the audience knows the context behind all of that.
That's a good point, actually, because with him, with Trump interrupting Biden so much, he didn't really take his time to say, "Here's a little bit of context. Here's the lie. Here's what happened with Hunter or whatever." He didn't do that. So, and that's because he didn't use his time wisely. And you know how Trump talks. He doesn't use the time he had. Like he's used to be like, I'm talking in front of the press. Everyone's here for me. I can take as much time as I want. And so he just goes on and on and on. It's fantastic, really great. I mean, really great, terrific. The polls, everyone says it. And it's like, okay, we got it. So he doesn't use his time properly. And then you brought this up before we started shooting. Ben Shapiro said it's like he just kept punching, where you really couldn't count the points that he was making. And someone like, I've got a cousin that called me today, and he's like, so what does this mean? What is up with this? So he needed the backstory on a lot of things, and I gave him as much information as I could remember. But and what I told him is, I'm like, I got furloughed because of COVID-19, so I didn't have any choice but to watch his COVID-19 press conferences and stuff like that. And so I remember when Cuomo said he's doing a terrific job. I remember when Newsom said it. I remember the respiratories and how we had more than other countries. I remember all of this. The respirators,
which you didn't end up using because they turned out to be counterproductive. Right?
Respiratories. You know what I mean? Respirators. So I remember all of that. I remember him talking about it. And I don't remember people, like, the media tried to complain and stuff like that. But for the most part, it was like, okay, he's doing, you could clearly tell he was doing everything he could. And he stopped some Chinese folks from coming over here from Wuhan. And he did all the right things.
As well, that the Democratic Party were calling him xenophobic for.
Right.
I mean, it's...
He did as much as he could with the information that he had. Like I really don't know what else. Like I've heard people say, the coronavirus is really going to hurt him. And I'm like, okay, I guess you're an expert now. What would you have suggested he do better? And I haven't heard one person from the left or the right say he should have done this better. And people can say, oh, he should have done this, but hindsight is 2020. You know what I'm saying? So we have more information now. We know more about COVID-19. He did everything he could with the information he had. And so that's what I had to tell my cousin today. He's like, okay.
And your cousin's a good example, because if you just tune in and then you're trying to catch up on all this stuff, it's like trying to watch Game of Thrones from like the fourth to last episode of like the 7th season. Like there's way too much context for you to ever understand anything, and you won't be able to appreciate a single word of what's happening. Not
to mention, this is the Trump era. Yeah. I mean, a week news cycle is insane. And then we're talking about the Dookie year.
I mean,
Dookie Pie year. It's been crazy.
I woke up this afternoon, which is my morning, right? Because I sleep during the day. And it was like Rick Moranis slugged in the face in New York. COVID-19 positive, president and his first lady. We've got like Alliance Defending Freedom. This group was telling, there some judge shut down, this school's ability to hide the fact that they were calling their kids some other gender than what they were, and that they were lying to the parents and instructed to tell the children to lie to their parents. It's like, it's just like one thing after the other just piled on. And so, especially if you use social media where they're all competing for your eyeballs, it's just like crazy headline, crazy headline, crazy headline, crazy headline, crazy headline, crazy headline. And then after 4 years of this stuff, which has really been more like 40 or 400 compared to the previous news cycles of any presidential era ever.
Right.
The human brain and the emotions can only handle so much. So these people are tuning into this debate, and they're watching two guys arguing who have stayed on top of this information every step of the way, and they're going at it. And the middle voters are looking at it like, I don't even understand half of what they said. I guarantee you, President Trump just made the Proud Boys 10 times more popular than they were before, because literally nobody had heard of them until now. I mean, you and I know who they are because we're in this thing, and so we know all these obscure groups and all these different things that are happening politically. Most people have never even heard of the Proud Boys until President Trump mentioned it at that debate. I guarantee you a ton of people had to Google them.
Mm-hmm.
They probably thought they were just like another division of the Klan or something until they actually looked them up. So, but everybody kind of knows Antifa because the Antifa is, in their neighborhood burning crap down.
Antifa burned down their
they're
store.
everywhere. They're just an idea, though. They're specters. They're just like a thought. But the point is that there's so much that the middle doesn't know because they don't pay attention. And this would be my admonishment, and I think we should close with this because we're starting to run over time, is that if you're in the middle and you're still waiting for Plato's Philosopher King, you are not acting in a patriotic or responsible fashion as an adult in modern day America. You have to be engaged in the process. You can't tune out because you're bitter about who your choices are. You can't pretend that the world will equalize itself under your hands-off sort of vaunted guidance.
Mm-hmm.
You have to actually be engaged in the process. You actually have to know who your local legislators are. You have to know what your mayor is up to. You need to know who the major politicians and power players are. And you need to spend a little time, even if it's just browsing social media, keeping yourself apprised of what's happening. Because this is the greatest country in the world. And the freedoms that afford you to act like an intellectually vain ass and sit back while the cities burn, and then you offer nothing but color commentary about how both sides are stupid, even though you barely understand either, is not appropriate nor effective. You need to be in a position where you have some skin in the game, because here's the real fact. You do. This is not one of those things where I'm telling you, oh, the Civil War will happen tomorrow. It already started.
Mm-hmm.
It may not be blood and guts yet, but it's already getting there. This is one of those things that's an ideological war. And if you want anything resembling the America that you have benefited from throughout your entire life to remain after this election, then you're going to need to get involved in the process and learn a little bit, which means taking some time to do that distasteful thing, which is to Google politics. And here's the other thing. Don't trust your eyes, because everything that you Google, especially on Google, is going to be biased towards the left. So now you're going to have to start digging up alternative media, and you're going to get into this giant quagmire. And I get it. You don't want to spend the time. Maybe you don't have the inclination. Maybe you just simply don't care. So what? You don't have a choice anymore. It's your obligation now as men who lead your families, whose future is dependent on you, to know what's going on, to know where to throw in your lot. Women, if you have the time, use it. Educate yourselves. Maybe you're the head of your household. You have the same responsibility. I mean, we're in lockdown. A lot of states haven't opened up yet, like Idaho, Florida, maybe South Dakota, a few others are returning to normal. Most are still in some kind of phase of reopening. A lot of people still don't have jobs and are waiting on tenterhooks to hopefully get some funding. Use that time wisely to educate yourself. Don't use it to just look at internet porn and play video games and be slothful and watch The Voice. You don't have an excuse anymore in the modern era. You have enough time. Know your politics. Know the players. Know the game. Because it's getting bad out there, and the reason it's getting bad out there is because you, who are the majority, for generations have ceded that territory to extremists with your absence.
Mm-hmm. Only thing I'll add is that the Greeks had a word for a person that didn't care about politics and didn't keep up with it. And that word was literally idiot.
Something to think about.